the guardians of the garden. The following story is currently being lived by my uncle and his family. I am from a city in the Salvador. My uncle and his wife live in a somewhat dangerous area due to gangs and a lot of robberies. They invited me to celebrate my little cousin's birthday over the weekend. I hadn't seen my uncle since he got married, so I decided to visit him and bring a gift for my little cousin who was only 6 years old. I also wanted to bring them some typical sweets. I arrived at night. I was very surprised by the place where they live. All around there are many dilapidated houses filled with graffiti everywhere. Also, in the streets you could see very thin and sick dogs. My cousin went to pick me up to take me home, as it would be dangerous for me to arrive alone. On the way I could see some neighbors whispering things to each other, and others, more friendly ones, were greeting us. Most of them looked at us in silence. My uncle's house was different from the rest of the area. It was very clean and with bushes attached to the wall. All this made it look very nice. The house itself is not a mansion or anything like that. It is a modest 2-story house, but my uncle's wife loves nature and has a beautiful garden. She keeps it tidy and looking nice. I like plants too, so I got to talking to my uncle's wife about her garden and vegetable garden. I also brought a jar of peach seeds from my house. These grow in 3 years and give peach all the time. Then I was invited in to meet my cousin. It was the first time I had seen him in person, so I spent the whole afternoon with him, and that's when the little guy started telling me that there were goblins in the house. I went along with him quite animated, because I like paranormal things, but my little cousin told me that if I brought some candy, I should leave it in the garden. I took out some candy and handed it to him. I kept watching what he was doing. He just left them on the little table in the garden and assured me that in a few minutes they would be gone. Just then my uncle came over. He offered me something to drink and we went for a glass of lemonade. When we returned to the garden table, the candy was gone. This happened in less than 5 minutes. I didn't know what to think, but my cousin told me that the goblins had taken it. My uncle intervened, saying that it was too early to tell such things to visitors. However, a while later, he invited me into the living room with his wife to tell me about the goblins. Then he told me that a few years ago, when my cousin had not yet been born, he was looking for a piece of land so that he could start building a house, so that my cousin would come into the world with a place to live. He looked for it near where his wife lived, but it was difficult due to several situations. However, he ended up in that area. When he bought it, something really caught his attention, and that was that the neighbors were behaving strangely. One of them approached him to ask him if they were going to live there. The man advised him that whatever he did, he should not remove the mountain of debris at the edge of the lot, otherwise the goblins would get upset. My uncle asked him what he was talking about, and the man replied that all the neighbors were afraid of the goblins because they cursed the place and were evil. One day they closed the hole with stones and garbage, and since then they stopped bothering them. However, my uncle felt the need to clean the whole area, and curious about what he had been told about the goblins, he opened the hole but saw nothing. My uncle continued with the construction, although some of the workers told him that they heard laughter at night. My uncle's wife began to tend the garden on weekends. She was the first one to see a goblin. She saw him a little blurry. He seemed to be naked and very small. He hid behind the flower pots. My aunt went over to corroborate what she had seen, but found nothing. Anyway, she had no doubt, and told my uncle. He is an open-minded person and said that, if that was the case, they would try not to bother them. He started researching about the goblins and how they liked candy, and how to keep them from taking their belongings without their permission. So they assumed that the garden made them happy, and started to take good care of the garden and leave the candy from time to time. They also left them milk, bread, fruits, and even jellies, sometimes ice cream and cake. Sometimes the goblins would take my cousin's toys, but they would bring them back. I was amazed at what they were telling me. I asked them if the goblins would mind if I, being a stranger, left them candy. My uncle answered that there was no problem and that in fact they were very calm and would continue to be so as long as I did not disrespect them, because they are very intelligent creatures. What caught my attention was that he asked me, "Why do you think the house is better cared for than the rest?" My uncle's wife told me that 2 years ago some assailants broke in. They broke through the gate and wanted to get into the house. The guys had guns. They were threatening us from downstairs so that we would open the door. Otherwise, they would start shooting. My aunt was very scared, trying to call the police. Then she heard several gunshots outside, but she didn't dare to look out. Then she heard screams and moans. That's when my aunt looked out without letting go of my cousin and saw that the thugs were shooting at the garden. They were shooting at some stones in the garden while they were complaining that something was scratching and biting them. In this way, the thieves eventually left. All the neighbors found out what had happened, and since then, no one has dared to try to attack the family. That's why people in the area sometimes rumor that my uncle made a pact with the devil and things like that. The truth is that all we do is be nice to the goblins, and they protect us in return. After the talk, the two of them invited me to the garden to leave candy. By that time, it was already dark. I stayed to see if I could see them, but my uncle told me that it didn't work that way. The goblins won't let themselves be seen or take anything if they feel they are being watched. Standing in the garden, I said, "Hi, I'm visiting, but I want to give you this to eat. I hope you like it." I left the candy on the wooden table under a tree. Some time passed and I returned to the garden, and I was very surprised to see that the candy had already been taken away. That left me impressed because I never imagined that they would be so fast. I couldn't sleep from the excitement and tried to hear something, but there was no noise. However, my curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked out the window with my phone. There was nothing out of the ordinary. I went back to bed and fell asleep. Sometime in the morning, I heard the family get up to start their daily chores. My cousin came down well-dressed for the party, and more people and children arrived to celebrate. Everything was very quiet and joyful. In the afternoon, before I went back to the bus, my cousin told me that the goblins liked me. Otherwise, they would have scratched me and tangled my hair in the night, especially for having been awake trying to spy on them. And well, to conclude this story, I will tell you that I have an invitation for Christmas, and I am going to visit them again.